Good afternoon, everybody. This is the lecture for this week, and we are entering the media history about Pakistan at the time of independence. These are also the first 11 years before the first martial law is also considered to be the formative years where the press started to get shape, and also the discussion revolves around what the press wanted to be, was it right or wrong, and also how the government press relations went. So, at the time of independence, one important connecting issue, because events don't happen out of the blue. Like 1947 is the time of independence, but it is no cutoff date from which the all earlier institutions died and the new ones just emerged. So, whenever you study history, keep in mind that it's the continuation of events, and things get into shape before that, before the event, or also contribute into the happening of certain events. And then when it happens, they start transforming because of their own ideals or the society overall. That's what we call an understanding of media system, instead of simply understanding when a newspaper or television or radio began and when it ended. So this is the more holistic approach to it. Since we already know that almost at the end of the 19th century, press did have an anti-colonial fervor, and they also wanted to get rid of the British in India and get a free India. Uh, we see that in the beginning of the 20th century, the second decade, the third one, it was kind of an idea of an independent India. There was no idea of partition, although we see in the 1930 uh, lectures of Allama Iqbal the idea of a Muslim states that could self-govern themselves are not uh, ruled by the majority. But the idea was not that clear. But all happened in almost at the end of the fourth decade, third decade of the 20th century. Certain political statements by Congress leadership, especially by Nehru, who was given the presidentship of Congress by Maulana Abul Kalam Azad, and who said that in a majority-dominated India, a democracy will naturally be steered or controlled by the Hindus who are in majority. So that statement is considered to be one of the guiding reasons uh, for the final decision of Muslims to start a struggle for an independent country. Although this was not new, but still, uh, we see that until the 1930s, Qaid-e-Azam was not decisive about Pakistan, but that's the parting moment. And from that moment onwards, we see an anti-colonial political movement, but for the Muslims, it was for separate state. The newspaper that really began with it was Dawn, which Qaid-e-Azam founded himself. Nawai Waqt was also a newspaper which agreed with Qaid-e-Azam's ideas, and they also claimed to be uh, a newspaper organization that was meant to struggle for a independent Muslim state. But that's not true, because they didn't. They were representing mostly the Unionist Party in Punjab, which were uh, uh, headed by the famous Noon family in Punjab. And so when that political party decided to side with with Muslim League and started talking about an independent Muslim state. Nawab Akht also changed position. Jang and Anjam were two newspapers which started in Delhi. I think it was in Delhi, and then they migrated to Lahore. And these were as they are right now. But now Jang is far more political than it was earlier after its independent television channels and a huge conglomerate it is right now. So they are more into politics than into journalism, I must say. The confrontation with the governments and all these things had made media really a very different institution than it was at the beginning of Pakistan. So what was the idea that the media had at the time of partition? So they thought that they had a role in a democratic polity, like the fourth estate, like it's the judiciary, it's the legislature, it's the executive, and it's the press, like the fourth estate. So this is very important because journalism in this model uh, is basically the natural check upon the functioning of the state. And this is a role that the Pakistani media started with, which was only the print media at that time. At the very inception of Pakistan, you can see names, big names like uh, Faiz Ahmed Faiz, Chirag Hassan Hasrat, Ahmed Nadeem Qasmi, affiliated to newspapers. And you can see the idealism and the faith in our independent country. Now, the question here is, where did they get from that? The motto is well known one: a good government with an adversary press becomes a great government. So the press thought that it represented the poor, uneducated, downtrodden people of the country, and its job was to inform the government of its weakness and also give information about what the people wish. Like the press also wanted to have what we call a horizontal system of information. This is one model in political communication where the vertical model is that you uh, if there is a problem, you ask the local authorities, and it goes up and up and then up one from the other, and to the other, and to the other, and at the end, and the message is distorted. And when it reaches, like you go to a local, for example, tehsildar, and you tell the guy, this is what my problem is, and then he tells his superior, and he tells him that it reaches the deputy commissioner, then the commissioner, then somehow the government, and it's all distorted because it's edited. Like everybody puts their own words into it. The horizontal model, which is considered to be democratic, means that people's what they call the aggregation of public interest, that the press informs about what's going on, and the people in the government read that or listen to it or watch it, and then they make decisions, they discuss it in the parliament, so the people's voice is not distorted. But the question here is whether the government wanted that, whether the government was serving the people in the same spirit. The answer is no, they didn't want it. They wanted to fit into the shoes of the colonial masters. This is the love-hate relationship that Pakistani and all post-colonial countries have. Their government has, like most of the leadership that was busy in uh, getting rid of their colonial masters in their countries. After independence, they decided to become the same masters, and like this has happened to Pakistan. There is a huge distance between the ruler and the ruled, and people are not considered to be part of a democratic polity, but rather uh, like people who are supposed to be ruled. Like they have to follow what the government says. And each and every government, if you see it into the politics of Pakistan, you'll see that like each government, when they are in a position, they will be talking about, like in any political party in a position, will be talking about human rights and freedom of expression and free media and all that stuff. And the moment they get into power, they'll just change their faces and they'll decide to become fascists, to be honest. And whenever they are out of power again, they'll again get into the same role. So this is the unfortunate uh, problem that most of the post-colonial societies, where there is no mental change after the change of leadership. So leadership is not responsible, but leadership most of the time behaves like colonial masters. If you go to England and you see the way the British Parliament works, it's different. But they behave like this in Pakistan or India or Bangladesh because they didn't have any sympathy with the people. But it's really unfortunate that the governments do the same. But that's true. So the media got the biggest hit. So how were the government persuasions? Like bribery, harassment, and the quest for control. Now, what is control basically? It's about the government wants people to think what it wishes them to think. And the only institution that stands in the way of this conditioning is the press. You should always keep in mind that the government's adversity to the press is not because the press has something bad to offer in itself. No, it's not the printed word or whatever goes on media, television, or radio. That's not the issue. The issue here is that the government wants complete monopoly of what we think and what we feel. The Article 19 in the Pakistani Constitution ensures that we are free to think and express ourselves. Media freedom is ensured, our right to information is ensured. But despite the fact that the governments pass those uh, constitutions, they don't get the spirit of it. And that's the truth. Uh, like as early as the early 1950s, there are reports that the government were having journalists on pay lists, newspapers and pay lists. Unfortunately, one of the most prestigious newspapers started by Maulana Zafar Ali Khan, the Urdu Daily Zamindar, was also amongst the pay list, uh, and among those who were paid money. He was long gone. It was not him. So you should keep in mind that he never compromised his ideals. So this gives us the first 11 years before the first martial law, like 1947 to 1958, where the press struggled to get its due right of uh, giving its opinion, which was not its opinion, but rather the opinion that it's got from the people and analysis and the intelligentsia uh, to the people and to the government. The government wanted to stall this and then became the press commission. The press commission was formed in the 50s. I think it was 52 or 54. I'll confirm that. To find if the Pakistani press was patriotic and loyal. First and foremost, just pause for a moment and think whether the very question is justified, whether the government had the right to doubt an institution's loyalty. I don't think so, but they did that. But here is what happened. The report of the press commission came, and the report told us that there was no problem with the press. This is how the report cites the results. The report says that the Pakistani press is by and large loyal and patriotic, and it has all the weaknesses that a newly emerging press might have. Like there is no question of being anti-state or whatever. Like a state just formed a couple of years back is looking at people who conspire against him. This sounds stupid, but this did happen. And this also paved the way of the future interaction between the government and the media. Mistrust, basically. So mistrust is what guides press government relations in Pakistan. Now, what did happen? And then I'll just move a bit into the military takeover and then we'll stop. The military takeover was 1958. General Ayub Khan decided to take over the country. He became the first civilian, first martial law administrator in Pakistan. He became the president later, a couple of years later. and he formed his own, decided to form a new form of type of government. It's all that we'll discuss later, but there are a couple of institutions that I would like to point out. The first and foremost was National Press Trust. National Press Trust was formed by General Ayub Khan, who was also president afterwards. Uh, and it decided to nationalize newspapers, like newspapers which were considered to be vocal against the government, or whose uh, behavior or working was considered to be doubtful. Now, here's the question: if the press commission's report absolve the Pakistani press of any doubt, then why should a government get into formation of National Press Trust? But this did happen. They didn't really care. One thing is that when the press commission reports were published, the military takeover didn't really bother to consider what the press commission's report was. But still, it was a document which was valid, which really gave us a nature of the press, but they just didn't want to have any criticism. So one of the biggest takeovers was what the newspapers, uh, no, not Nawab. It was Pakistan Times, Imroz, and Lelo Nihar, and also Mashriq. Pakistan Times, Imroz, and Lelo Nihar were part of what we call Progressive Paper Limited. Mazhar Ali Khan was the editor of the whole uh, newspaper uh, organization. The editor of Pakistan Times was Faiz Ahmed Faiz, of Imroz was Charagh Hassan Hasrat, and of Lelo Nihar, the weekly Lelo Nihar, was Ahmad Nadeem Qasmi. So you can really see how important journalism was in the during the first 11 years after independence. Like people who we still know, I hope you know them, as stalwarts in Pakistani history when it comes to literature and struggle for freedom expression and all these things, uh, were part of one news organization. The takeover was fatal for these newspapers because they became mouthpieces of government, and that has really ended their role in the media. It was taking over these papers and sending message to the others that if they do anything like that, if they criticize the government, then they will face the same fate. Then came the press advice. Press advice is something which means that the phone call that people refer to and the WhatsApp messages that come from the government or other officials, which tell you if you could kindly please give space to this news item, or don't or not to give this news, or give this news in this format. This is kind of press advice. And press advice began during Ayub Khan's regime, and press advice was binding. It was not an advice. If you don't accept the way they ask you to do, they will really come after you. They can uh, close down your newspaper. They can confiscate your printing press, or simply they can take over your whole newspaper and say, okay, let's see, we'll investigate and see if everything that you are doing is legal, and if you are not getting money from any outside source harming Pakistan. So once we go through the whole investigation, we'll decide whether we'll give the newspaper back to you or not. It was not given back, and whenever given back, it was not much left of it because there was nothing else left. And then the Press and Publication Ordinance in 1960, which just brought in everything that was against the press into one document. We'll discuss it later. So why was the government so averse to the press? The answer to the question is simple. They wanted to control the narrative, as I said in the beginning. They wanted nobody to come uh, in the middle of their the way people of Pakistan should live and think and act. So the press was the only hindrance. They thought that if they get control of the press and if they force it to submission, the way to brainwash people will be easy. It's like living the famous George Orwell novel 1984. They were successful, I must say. They were not unsuccessful. The way we think and behave right now shows that conditioning. And the problem with such conditioning is that when it happens, you are not open to influences from within the country. But in a globalized world, anybody can change your way of thought. Anybody can persuade you to do things that are, at the end of the day, harmful for you, for yourself, for your nation. And this is happening. Naturally, they couldn't foresee the advent of social media and information explosion and technological explosion. They were serving their own mm, interests. But it really uh, damaged the press ability uh, to build healthy public opinion. But all was not lost, I must say. We'll discuss it later. The journalists were struggling. There was a lot of rigor in Pakistani society, and people wanted to get control of their country and have it for themselves. Uh, we'll discuss this in our later lectures and face to face meetings or online meetings. So, this is all for now. If you have any questions, uh, please do let me know. We'll talk about it on in detail on Wednesday. Thank you.